And thank you, Rachel.
Hello and welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here. We'll give just a moment for folks to continue to join. But just to get us started, hello, I'm so glad to meet you all, even virtually. My name is Emily Betterton. I use she, her pronouns, and I am an assistant director with New Student and Family Programs. And we are so excited to have our colleagues in Disability Services at UMass Amherst here to talk with you all today. This is a really great opportunity to learn about what services they offer, how to get involved, how to start getting things done ahead of time. And so we're really glad that you're here and you're ready to start thinking about that. And so with that, if y'all have any questions throughout the presentation, we're going to have question and answers at the end. So please, at the bottom of your screen, you should have a Q&A button or an option down there. You can go ahead and click that and type any questions that you have into there. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Please feel free to chat myself if you have any questions throughout the program about Zoom or anything like that. But I'm going to turn it over to our fantastic campus partners, Anne-Marie Thorpe and Rachel Adams with Disability Services.
Thank you, Emily. Hello again, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Rachel Adams, and I am the Associate Director for Education and Training on Disability Services. And I'm here with Anne-Marie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anne-Marie Thorpe. I'm the Director of Disability Services. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm delighted to be with you today.
So let's get started. So we're going to talk about some of the essential things that we think students need to know if they have a disability and about campus and our office. And here we go. So some of the objectives that we have for folks today is essentially we want you all to have some kind of an awareness around the purpose and the scope of disability services, knowing who should register with our office and the components of the registration process. And also about students' rights and responsibilities and how there's a big shift in higher education, which I think is true for all college students, and some particular things around disability rights and responsibilities that shift. So this is what we'll be getting into today. So first, the purpose and the scope of disability services. So what do we do? Essentially, we are the place that students register confidentially for all of their accommodation needs. So we are deeply committed to equitable access, and we embrace the philosophy that every student should have access to a quality higher education. So we're very much committed to full access for all people and the empowerment of people with disabilities. For students, both academically and in campus life. And we have direct services that we provide for all types of disabilities. And the way that we do this is achieved through accommodations. So accommodations essentially are any kind of a modification or adjustment to a course, program, service, job, activity, or facility that enables students or employees with qualifying disabilities to participate equally. So essentially, when you think about the experience of being a student, there's, I would say, pieces of academics, there's pieces of student life, and there's even jobs that students have on campus. And so what we do is that we help to provide accommodations for these three spheres, if you will, of the student experience at UMass. And the way that we do this is we evaluate accommodations on a case-by-case basis. A lot of times when I'm interfacing with new students and their families, I get questions about the types of programs and accommodations that we offer. So we want to give you a little bit of an overview around that as well. And I want to put the caveat in there that this is not exhaustive, that there are many, many, many accommodations that we can provide, but because it's on a case-by-case basis, we would be here all day and it still wouldn't be enough time. So, broad overview of some more common, I would say, common accommodations and programs. The first, and I think this is the most popular, is our note-taking program. So we have this app, it's called Genio, formerly called Glean. And students can get a license for this that they can download to their computers. They also can use it on the web. And what this does is it audio records classes. And it's really interesting because as you're audio recording, you can timestamp important information and go back and review that later. And so it's a really good tool that students can use if they need support with note taking. We also know that in some circumstances, an app is not going to be appropriate. And so we also have a volunteer note taker program where there's a peer note taker who will upload their notes. So students who need a peer note taker can download those anonymously and get their notes that way. Another very common accommodation is on-campus housing requests. So these are things like looking at for physical access, for example, if you need an elevator in a building, or if you need to be on a lower floor. We also have things like visual alarms if you may be deaf or hard of hearing. So that way it's not just an auditorial cue, that you're also getting cues around alarms that are visual. Bed shakers is another one. And for climate control, we also can offer air conditioning. Some more common accommodations are exams. That is a huge one. We have an exam proctoring center that students can take their exams with us. If their instructors are unable to meet a student's exam accommodation needs, then we can help to support the student. And things like additional time on exams or a distraction reduced setting are some examples there. And then finally, we have another popular program here. It's called the Learning Specialist Program. And essentially, this is offers some things like executive functioning coaching, disability mentoring, so understanding disability and how that intersects with people's learning process and understanding themselves as students, and different strategies, neuro-inclusive strategies for assignments and studying. So that's a very popular program that we offer, again, amongst many others. So furthermore, we have programs and services like classroom access assistants, or here it's CAAs. That's like how we abbreviate it. These assistants are hired to support any folks who may have some physical access needs in their classes. So one example could be if you're in a lab and you need someone to pour or measure things because you can't use your hands. A classroom access assistant would be able to, at your direction, pour certain amounts into different vessels, and essentially help give you the same or a similar experience to your peers, that otherwise you might not have access to if they weren't there to manually move the equipment. We also have our communication access program. So this is where we work with ASL interpreters, and we secure them for different courses, for example. We also have access equipment or services like remote captioning. So if you are someone who is deaf or hard of hearing, you would want to connect with our communication access program coordinator, to help with securing all of these communication needs. We also have furniture access. So if you need any kind of special furniture in your classroom, we can place that wherever it's needed so you can use it and be comfortable in your learning environment. Physical access. So this is where we are reviewing needs for across the entire campus, trying to holistically ensure that all paths of travel are open and safe and accessible for people to use, no matter how they're moving through the world. And so we have folks who are constantly going around campus and examining things to make sure that things are safe and easy to travel. And finally, we have a document conversion program. So this helps for folks who may need alternative formats, accessible formats for different mediums like books or PDFs and text documents. We also want to say that we are not the only shop in town, and that we are constantly working with our partners across campus. And we're referring students to go and check out some other places that help with campus accessibility. So I want to give a shout out to our Assistive Technology Center. This is in the Du Bois Library in the lower level Learning Commons. And they offer support around different assistive tech tools. So there's instruction, training, right? They're there to help you if you want to take advantage of any of the really amazing tools that they have. I use them. I know a bunch of my colleagues use them. A bunch of students use them, so check them out. There's the Disability Culture Club. So this is a registered student organization, and it helps to promote awareness around what it means to have a disability as a lived experience and a social identity. And they get together weekly and they do fun activities and social events in our disability community space. There's also College Life on the Spectrum, which is a drop-in space support group. And this is facilitated by one member in Disability Services and one member in our Center for Counseling and Psychological Health. And they never have a hard time getting people to join. It seems like a really vibrant group that's very supportive. It has people coming back every semester. So if that's something that interests you, I recommend to check it out. The Alliance Against Ableism is a community of people and allies who come together to promote an accessible world for everyone. This group often is involved with our Office of Equity and Inclusion and have been recipients of campus climate grants and different initiatives to help make the campus an accessible and welcoming place for disability. So we do have a community space, as I mentioned before, which is located in Goodell 331. And this is a space for community members to engage in a variety of different activities, to connect with others and just learn about disability, because disability is a vastly rich experience. And if you've met one person with a disability, you've met one person with a disability, and we want to try to get people to connect with community while they're here on campus in a myriad of ways. Um, and finally, accessible van service. So this is for if you have any kind of mobility related disability, they will be able to help shuttle you across campus Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. So this is trying to cover when most of the classes are. And this can be something if it's a disability you're born with, you can use the van service. If you are temporarily disabled, like if you break an ankle, you can use the van service as well. So they're a great resource to have here because this is a very big campus and you will probably do lots of walking.
So you're probably asking yourself, who should register with us? And am I going to be eligible for accommodations? And what counts as a disability? As you know, that is a context-based, but typically if you are engaging in this conversation, you may already be eligible. So we are asking for folks who maybe had an IEP or a 504 plan in school. If you are a person with a psychological disability, if you have anxiety, depression, OCD, etc. If you are a neurodivergent person or someone with learning disabilities, so perhaps on the autism spectrum, someone with ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia, language processing disorders, sensory disabilities, blind and low vision, auditory processing, physical disabilities, if you use a mobility device or have limited use in your body, medical disabilities as well, and really anything in between. We have many students who identify with many of those experiences. What we really want you to know is that we are here for you and that we would encourage you to register with us as early as possible. More and more students with disabilities are making their way to college, and we're will be appropriate for you and get them in place for you for the start of the fall semester. Rachel mentioned earlier temporary disabilities. We do also work with students who have temporary disabilities. And also we know that disability occurs all the time. Accident, illness, etc. And so if this doesn't apply to you, but it applies down the road, please know that registering with us as soon as possible is always the best first step to getting you what you need. Students, we talk a lot in this world about diagnoses. So typically you would provide diagnostic documentation that's relevant to your disability. So there's not any one form. If you are deaf or hard of hearing, an audiogram is going to be appropriate. If you have a medical disability, a letter from your physician would be appropriate. But also we recognize that there are students who are dealing with disabilities that don't have that documentation. So we do accept self-reports. And that's also a really key element to why we have this iterative process. It's essential that we are hearing from the student where their strengths and challenges are, where they're feeling a need for more support, so that we can try to assist. Some folks are going to have outdated documentation, for instance, but in some cases it's going to apply the date, but typically if you were born with spina bifida, you're going to have spina bifida for your life. So the date of the documentation isn't so important to us as much as you connecting with us to see if we can provide what you need. So we also recognize there are lots of barriers. Not everyone has access to medical care. Not everyone has access to the financial resources to go through testing. So we do have some scholarship funds here. If you find yourself in a situation where you've not been tested and you're having some challenges, we can connect you to some resources to get testing. So there's some information here on the screen for that. But don't use that as an opportunity. Don't use that as a reason not to connect with us. If we can be of assistance, we want to try to be. The registration process itself, we want to be really clear about that. Where do you start? How do you register? And what to expect? So we're going to walk you through it. There is a QR code, and you'll be able to access that too. That will bring you to Clockwork. Just to provide you a little context, Clockwork is the database that we use, and there are multiple portals to it. So you will use Clockwork as a student to register with us, to, if you're eligible for notes, you pull your notes from there, you book your exams through it. So there's a student portal for those reasons. There's a faculty portal, which is where they will obtain your accommodation letters when you're done with the process, and can participate in communicating with us around your exam process. All of those portals are feed from the same information, but there's lots of permissions in there. So it's really important for us that you know that we are going to address the accommodation needs that you have, and we're going to communicate with folks who need to know what those accommodation needs are, but we don't ever disclose your disability. It could be a very obvious one, but that's not the nature of why we need to be communicating with folks. So just to be clear about that, we don't go into that much detail. So the first step is that the student will need to log into Clockwork to complete the registration. There are links right on our website. There's the QR code. It's pretty simple. You're going to log into it with your NetID and password. It's typically the beginning part of your email. And then once we receive your information includes the registration questionnaire and whatever documentation or self-report you submit to us. Once we receive that, you'll get an email from us saying that you are encouraged to schedule a welcome meeting with an access coordinator. You will log into Clockwork to schedule an appointment with an access coordinator that works for your schedule, and that you can access Clockwork 24/7, and then it'll tell you when appointments are available. You can book your appointments to be in person, virtually, over the phone if that's the only option, and of course we're in person. So you will schedule that appointment. At that appointment, you will discuss your accommodation requests. We'll talk about your disability documentation and what your lived experience is. So we don't want to, if you've tried a strategy or used a tool before that was not helpful, we want to know that so that we don't waste your time exploring that. So it's very important to the iterative process that we're hearing from the student about the lived experience. And then the accommodation requests are going to be processed by a review committee, and that committee will make sure that the process is reviewed by multiple parties, it's fair and equitable, and that the important thing to know is that that process can take 2 to 3 weeks. So the earlier you register with us, the quicker it can get through the review process. In order for you to be informed of this last step, you will be informed via your UMass email, which is the only way we can reach out to you, regarding the determination of your accommodation request. So it'll let you know what accommodations you've been deemed eligible for. If your request was denied, why, and additional information is provided, instructions on how to appeal, how to provide additional documentation, et cetera. But so the registration process is pretty easy, but there are a few steps to it. Also, it's important to mention that your access coordinator is your key liaison to our office. You may hear from various employees in disability services, but that's the person that you contact when you've got questions, concerns, etc. You'll have their email address. Also, we do have triage, access coordinators on triage every day that we are open. So there's always someone you can reach out to for help. I would say if there's one piece of advice I could give students, it is to keep in contact with us and to be in touch with us quickly, so that we can assist in a timely manner. Okay. When you go to this QR code, it's going to bring you to this menu. So just to let you know, you're in the right spot if you're seeing this. You would click on registration form to begin the registration process. But this is the main menu that you're going to see anytime you log into Clockwork. As you'll see here, you can use this for if you are uploading additional documentation. When you go to submit your letters to your faculty members, you will select this option. If you're eligible for exam accommodations and need to schedule an exam with us, you would use this. You can schedule an appointment with your access coordinator here. You can check if you have an appointment coming up or if you've booked an exam. Those are all under this icon. And then if you're eligible for notes from a student note taker, they will download them here so that you will be able to upload them from this pin icon. And then this last one is just for the student note takers who volunteer for us, for them to upload their notes. So pretty straightforward. Registering, as I mentioned, Clockwork is our data management tool. You're going to upload relevant documentation to Clockwork. What we mean by relevant is we don't want your entire medical file. You don't need anyone to be in your business that much, and we don't want to review all of that just to find out that you have dyslexia. So share with us what's relevant, fill out the form, and then send in those materials. The one thing about the registration form is if it takes you a bit to turn it in, you may want to look at the PDF beforehand just to prepare for those questions, because it currently does not have a way for us to save it in progress and in process. So just a heads up there. Your welcome meeting is going to be that first appointment with your access coordinator. You'll have scheduled it. You can have it in person, online, or over the phone. And the most important piece is that it has to be with the student. We do often have parents who wish to attend this meeting. We don't keep parents from attending the meeting, but it's imperative that we're hearing from and engaging with the student, because it's important that we are learning from them what is needed, and that we're able to have really frank and open conversations about the totality of college life. That can feel just a little disruptive to parents who've been largely involved in the process at this time. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. But also, this is a time for students to step up into their power and engage and speak from their own experience and to learn to try some new things. The determination of your accommodation is made through the review committee. As I stated earlier, it can take 2 to 3 weeks to complete. The access coordinator is going to communicate with you about what accommodations you are deemed eligible for. They're also going to talk to other offices about any accommodations you're eligible for that they need to be notified about. So for instance, if you have a housing accommodation, the access coordinator will let Residential Life know that you're eligible for the accommodation. And then it's still the responsibility of the student to make sure that they're engaging in the residence life process and timeline, knowing that Res Life has the information regarding the accommodation. So there are still responsibilities on the student to be mindful of those deadlines. Students are, once aware of their accommodations, they're going to send their accommodation letters to their instructors via Clockwork. There are instructions on how to do that in the email that the access coordinator is going to share. It's very easy on Clockwork to do that. And that lets us know that the instructors have been informed. That way, if they contact us, we can answer any questions that they might have. But we can't hold them accountable to doing what we are implementing those accommodations until we know for sure that they have been informed. So students can always submit additional information or documentation to seek approval for additional accommodations through the review process. So if, for instance, you requested something that there didn't seem to be necessarily a need for or a barrier to overcome, we may ask for that. That is not unusual. It's not a hostile move in any way. It's just part of the process because we can only provide accommodations when they are necessary and relevant and reasonable. So in our business, we talk about this being part of the iterative process, and the iterative process is one that is a consistent engagement, a relationship with our office where students' needs are going to change over time, and being in concert with our office about that is going to be most helpful. And lastly, just a piece that no accommodations can be provided retroactively. So another reason to get registered with us as soon as possible is to make sure that your accommodations are in place, because if you don't come to us until, say, the end of the semester, and for example, perhaps you missed some assignments or had a lot of absences, your accommodations, even if you were eligible for those things at the end of the semester, would not negate the fact that you missed those assignments or missed those courses previously. So being in contact with us is pretty imperative there. I'm going to move on to students' rights and responsibilities in higher ed. It's very important to know, to highlight to incoming students and families how this shift can impact students. And I would say also parents. As a parent myself, a parent of a student who has accommodations, your role is shifting, and we want to be transparent with you about that we absolutely care for and support your students, but that your role in their accommodation process changes because they're adults. So we will get into what that looks like a little bit more. So the laws essentially change for your rights and responsibilities as a student. You are treated as an adult, and the onus on students in higher education is to make sure that they are taking the responsibility to inform us that they're here. Unlike K-12, where your students, your teachers and your administrators and your special ed department are all aware of your documentation, here, that is very different. You're going to register with us. Your access coordinator is likely to have access to it. But otherwise, anyone we would inform is going to be at the, you're going to be the one who starts that process. You start that process by registering with us, by providing information, and we assist you in that process in informing campus offices and you informing your faculty. So the onus is really on the student to take that responsibility, which is really a new role for a lot of folks in regards to self-advocacy. So that can also impact parents. So we know that parents tend to be super involved to get students to this point. We often have to be the ones that fight for access and documentation and resources. And then you come to college and we say, we got it from here. And that can feel scary. We totally understand that. We can take information from you, but because your student is an adult, this is information that we could take with us, but we cannot and won't be following up with you in ways in which you may be accustomed. So some of those ways are that, you know, you may be used to a PowerSchool app where you can see your students' grades in real time. That's just not something that exists in college, but also not something that the parent would be notified of. So encourage you to just be aware of that. And also on the student end, you know, you might be really accustomed to things that your parents do for you that you may not have even known that they've done. So it is going to now be your responsibility to take on some of these transitions. And some of them can be a little bit harder than anticipated. I always say that there's lots of movies about coming to college, but none of them are about, like, it's always about the fun stuff and not about like, oh, shoot, hey, I used to have to just worry about getting to school on time. Now I have to figure out how I'm going to get from point A to point B within a certain time frame and plan to do that for all of my courses and events. So that's just a little bit of the shift that comes with coming to higher education from a K-12 environment, where typically when we talk about acclimating to campus, you know, the context is different. You are going from having teachers that you see in class every day and maybe joke around with in the cafeteria to someone that you may see once or twice a week for the time period of class. And so you might have to make time in your schedule to go to office hours and get accustomed to building those relationships with faculty in a way that's different from your teachers. The other piece is, you know, just advocacy in general. Our K-12 model takes some of the advocacy away from students. In higher ed, the advocacy is all on the student. So it's helpful, it's developmentally appropriate, but it's also something that we're learning, particularly post-COVID, is a little bit more challenging for some of our students. So we've got a little bit of a handout that talks a little bit about some of the logistical changes, some of the things that we would encourage you to reflect on before you come to school, and just some ways to help you prepare for those more minor transitions that can kind of build on one another and then feel like a bit of a challenge. So for instance, when we're talking about coming to college, you're managing moving to a new environment, typically living with a new person, going to courses that have more rigor, having to get to various locations in a certain amount of time. And you've got to put yourself out there to meet peers in a way that's maybe a little less organic than if you grew up and lived with the same kids in your town since kindergarten. So just all things to consider. We find that students, the more aware they are of this, and the more they engage with these behaviors, the more success that they have when they're here. And that's the whole point of why we want you to know this. We just want you to be successful. We're delighted that you're here, and we want you to get the support that you need. And lastly, the piece around support is that we are a really key player in that support, but we're not everything. So there are a variety of other campus resources that we encourage you to utilize. The Center for Counseling and Psychological Health, Psychological Services, Center for Women and Community, the Center for Multicultural Advancement and Student Services, Stonewall Center, there's the Office of Religious and Spiritual Life, the Veterans Center. There are, I believe, 400 plus registered student organizations on campus. So get out there, meet people. The more connected you feel to the campus community, the better that you're going to perform. People sometimes worry about focusing on the non-academic piece will halt the academic progress, but really what we find is that students who are more at home here, who are better connected, also tend to do better academically. So you're not just here for academics. We want you to have a fully accessible experience. We do have additional campus academic resources. Your professors and your TAs are some of your best resources. Your TAs are typically, graduate students or upper level students. Always good to make connections with them. The Learning Resource Center is a gem. They offer lots of academic support and some like tutoring, right central in the WB E.B. Du Bois Library that you've all seen. And the Writing Center is also located in there. There are some Math Help Center and academic departments that can provide some additional support. And we encourage all of our students to reach out, utilize these free resources at their disposal, and also to build those relationships with your faculty. Later on down the line, those relationships can benefit you with opportunities, meeting some cool folks, and also reference letters and recommendations for jobs and additional graduate resources, etc. And lastly, there's so many ways to connect with us. Our website has tons of information and resources. If you've got just a quick question you couldn't answer from the website, disability@umass.edu is our main email address. Our phone number is here. We are in a new office this year. We are in 435 Goodell, which is lovely if you are on campus. And we are open 8:30 to 5 Monday through Friday. And we also have an Instagram page. So thank you for listening. We are happy to move on to the Q&A.
All right. Thank you so much, Rachel and Anne Marie. We're so glad that you were able to share all of that super helpful information with us. And we do have some questions that are coming in through the chat. So myself and a couple of our student orientation leaders are going to read out the questions that we have for you, if y'all wouldn't mind answering them. And first up, we have a question about what if a student has to leave for medical treatments? I'm not sure if you can speak to anything medical related.
We work with plenty of students who see specialists or have to go for medical treatments. We can talk to them about if there's a possibility of moving some of those treatments closer to make that a little bit easier for them. And if it's not possible and they have to be done externally, we would ask for the student to meet with the access coordinator to have a conversation, to look at the feasibility of that. Typically it's not a problem, but obviously if it's like something that's needed every week and it was going to keep someone from being able to attend class, that would be a different scenario. So some of the challenging aspects of answering, like, would you definitely get this accommodation, are hard because we do need to look holistically at the full spectrum of the student experience, what classes they're in, if their absence would be considered a fundamental alteration of the course. So they're a little tricky there, but what I can say is that we certainly have had students have to leave for medical treatments, and once they register with us, we could figure that out with them.
All right. So our next question, the participant asks, the student has had a 504 throughout high school, and they filled out an online form, and they were asked to receive a letter from the therapist and the doctor. So the question is, do these letters need to provide what disability they have or what the physician says she needs? And also, do we also need to provide the 504 plan history?
That's a great question. Definitely, it would be helpful to have the letter from the therapist outlining what the disability is. Occasionally, we do get letters from physicians saying student X will need a single room and, X, Y, and Z. We take those as, recommendations, but our role here at Disability Services is to look at the disability in context. So what's going to be more important to us is that the physician has diagnosed this person, less what they recommend, because that's going to be part of our conversation here. I would also say that this is
The diagnosis, and the impact, the level of impact is helpful. Yep.
exactly. So this is also a situation where having the student provide that information either through the conversation with the access coordinator or by submitting a self-report talking about the impact of their anxiety would be helpful.
And then for the question around the 504 plan and history,
Oh,
you can absolutely submit that. The 504 plan itself does not carry over into the higher education setting, because it's a different setting, different context, different laws. But I will say that the 504 plan does help give us some context and information around the experience in high school. And so it is a helpful data point for us to have. If you have that, I would recommend uploading that in addition to the other documents you have.
Okay, so our next question is how to send additional documents after the registration.
yes, right there on the menu in Clockwork is an icon for sending additional documentation. It's a great question because sometimes we will have folks re-register thinking that will add it, but what it does is wipes out the initial registration. So there's a specific icon for adding additional documentation, and that's going to be real helpful to us.
Perfect. So our next participant asks, how long should it take to go from step 1 to step 2? My student registered maybe 2 weeks ago. They do not think it was Clockwork, but they definitely submitted an application to Disability Services.
Okay. The process of all of our registration information goes in through Clockwork, so they may not have been clear that it was called Clockwork, but if they went to the disability website and selected a registration button, it likely was Clockwork. What seems a bit odd is that typically it's about 48 hours between when a student has submitted those pieces of information, that between that and when they hear back from us saying, hey, please schedule an appointment. So if they haven't heard from someone in 2 weeks, I would definitely have them contact the disability@umass.edu website, email address, because that goes to our registration coordinator. So that seems a little bit odd. If they had a meeting and hadn't heard from someone and it had only been 2 weeks, I'd say sit tight for 1 more week. But if it was just getting from, I've submitted my materials and I haven't heard back from UMass Disability Services, something went awry there. So definitely have them follow up with us.
Okay, so our next question is, Would you want a full recent neuropsych report submitted with an older 504 plan?
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah.
ideal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think what that points out is to us, it's far more helpful to have the testing
Mhm.
than just the outcome. Because the testing is going to help us put it in the context of the rigor of college.
All right, so our next question asks, if a student is newly accepted and possibly needs housing accommodation, how early can the student start this process? Can it be started immediately after their initial deposit has been submitted?
I think as soon as they get UMass email and Spire ID, they can start the process.
We typically start looking at incoming students the Monday after commencement. So we receive information beforehand and sort of hold on to it just so we can continue servicing our seniors. But once our seniors have moved on, we transition to onboarding our new students. So yeah, like end of May on, we begin reviewing new students to prepare for summer and fall.
And I appreciate this question because housing assignments can be one of the more challenging ones, given, we're on a campus with only so many dorm rooms. So the earlier the better, especially for housing accommodations, because then we can talk to Res Life, we can talk to housing, and get the ball moving that way. So I appreciate that question. The earlier the better.
Okay, so the next question is, the disability disclosure form PDF section for the accommodation seems too small for the clinician to enter the list of accommodations. Where and how the remaining information can be entered?
I believe that there's a text box at the bottom of the registration form. You could always submit that information just on Clockwork as additional information. You could mail it to us, you could fax it to us. Anyway is fine, but perhaps maybe noting it in the registration form that additional information is coming could help. And I'll pass on that feedback so we can try to make it bigger.
Perfect. So our next question is, would it be worth dropping by to discuss possible options, or should we just wait until the welcome meeting?
I think I would love for us to be able to have more drop-ins. We can handle drop-ins for like sort of general information about our services. But it is more important to wait until the welcome meeting simply because that person is going to have access to your documentation and the conversation with you about what you know about yourself. Whereas if you just drop by, your access coordinator might not be in that day. So we operate this way because we're a large organization, but we want to make sure that we've got time for everybody.
Okay, so the question is, we had looked briefly at the questionnaire asking what accommodation do you want, and then to upload supporting documentation. So what if a student doesn't know what specific accommodation is available, but knows the struggles that they have and does have the testing for it?
I think
Rachel, you want to take
that's-
that one?
Yeah, I think that is a really good place to start because essentially in the welcome meeting, what happens is the students are really trying to discuss their lived experience. So if the student knows the struggles that they're facing, that the access coordinator is going to be able to listen and to hear that, and they're thinking about what's going to be most appropriate to help mitigate these challenges in the college setting. And so that I think is powerful and is a good place to start. And once the accommodation determination has been made, it's been through the review process. the student tries it out and is like, this is helpful, but maybe, I'm still curious about some other options, then they can interact with us. They can go and meet with our access coordinator again and revisit the conversation. So after the welcome meeting, it's not one and done, it's set in stone. It can be this iterative process. But right there, I'm seeing if the student's aware of what their challenges are, then they have some self-awareness, and that is a strength that they're coming in, and an asset that we appreciate students knowing.
All right. So our next question is, if a student is granted accommodations such as extra time on exams, are they required to notify professors and use the accommodations?
No.
So this is a good question, because I think I want to pick it apart for a second. Are they required to use the accommodations? Never. Students are never required to. It is at their discretion around when and if they would like to use the accommodations. However, for the piece around using accommodations for exams and notifying their professors, yes. Students should always be in communication around exams, so the professor can either make the accommodation arrangements for them in the class, or if they can't do that, then they need to coordinate with our exam proctoring center. So yes, communicate with professors. No, they don't have to use the accommodations.
Great, thank you. We also have a question here. Do you need additional information coming in as a transfer student, as in the previous institutions given accommodations or anything like that?
It's always helpful to have a letter from the previous institution that highlights what the student was accommodated for. That is how we handle all of our like 5 college students who come here for courses and such. If they wanted to provide their documentation, that is also helpful, but typically the letter from the other institution stating what accommodations they've been provided has sufficed.
Great, thank you. And in the interest of time, that's going to be where we cut our questions for today. However, if you do still have questions, Rachel and Anne Marie, what would be your preferred method of getting those questions answered?
I think if you sent them to the disability@umass.edu email address, our receptionist can get your questions sent either to us or the person with the most expertise in that particular question to respond to you as quickly as possible.
Fantastic. So any further questions can be directed right to Disability Services email. And with that, we are going to wrap up this webinar. I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you, Rachel and Anne Marie, for providing us with this information. And we hope that this has been able to answer some of your questions or help you figure out what your next steps should be. So if you have further questions for new student and family programs specifically, you can always email our office as well. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for coming. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. And one final thing I'll say is I will have a copy of the slide deck in the resource folder for folks. And Emily, I can send you the link to that to share it with participants today.
Fantastic. So I'll share that out along with the recording of this session if you'd like to go back or share it with any peers or colleagues who may be also interested. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.